so much for taking out time, Gitanj, Ken, and Siva. Really appreciate you bringing your thoughts across on the perspective. We obviously have co-discussed that what does a $1 billion company mean and what does it take to build a $1 billion company. While we've often had conversations about what it is, I would try to move around various thoughts of what really does a $1 billion company mean. Is it only about the number? Is it about the impact you have on people, or just the way people perceive you on the other side of the table to participate in the growth that you're trying to do? Gitanj, you run India's largest asset mobility company, if I may use that word, getting people to rent, getting people to be more mobile, getting people to scale up their decisions of not being connected with assets, which is the other side of the play. Would love to hear from you. What does Rento Mojo build on the construct of being one of India's largest category leaders, and what it took for you to really build that organizations, working with large consulting companies and also with organizations which have made great pioneering step on e-commerce, not only in India, but today a pretty well-known firm globally as well. So, Gitanj, what does $1 billion company as an idea mean to you as a CEO and as someone who really wants to really look at it? What does that mean?
So I think thanks Pranav. So yeah, so this is our 6th year running, and I think we are, with each passing year we're also discovering the new stages of the evolution altogether. So I think the early years we're still trying to figure out the product market fit and really scaling up. We've raised over 250 over $50-60 million so far, in terms of overall capital and debt and equity. I think the biggest challenge while growing up was the fact that this kind of a product offering that we give out, although existed for the consumer, but purely from a business model perspective was not scalable, because you need to get a lot of capital from the debt and the banks and then use that capital to deploy with the consumers, and that made it very unscalable. So we first solved that, and I think along the way now, since we have the product market fit and everything, and we have proved the economics, I feel purely from a $1 billion perspective, that's a great milestone that the company has, and it's more adopting a culture towards that. I would say a $1 billion company is happens when we read it on the PR and the news, but I think the preparation for it goes 1 or 2 years before that. Yep. I think once the company has reached a certain scale, then it's just how the team comes up, how the culture comes up towards a $1 billion IPO or exit or whatever valuation. Essentially you need to walk on that path. That means your governance should be fairly strong. That means everyone should be aligned with a fairly stronger vision at the end of the day, and there should be a hunger for growth on a every day-on-day basis. Some of those aspects put together translates, I would feel, into a more $1 billion sort of a setup, which we are which we want to also be on the same path for.
So Ken, I'm going to pick that up, and I've seen you build organizations. We come from backgrounds just similar, not only purpose partnerships with organizations we are scaling up, but I'm going to take a step back when you're with Antler building partnerships and really being the entrepreneur in residence. What has been your ecosystems of identifying potential ideas and orientations which you have believed would make a $1 billion entity? Is it just the valuation, or is it something else, the people, the market, or just an idea that you believe in? What mix has made you recognize that that is a value that may be conjuncted to growth and also through opportunity? So Ken, what's been your process on that?
Sure. I think think really the most important thing is finding something that your customer really wants. So really identifying who they are and then really figuring out what it is that they're looking for and what problem you can help them solve. I think that's getting to be a little bit trite these days, kind of ever since the lean startup has come out. It's almost become dogma, but I think it really is true. So you have to look at it in a nuanced way. So it's not just like, who are you trying to sell to? You also have to think about your suppliers and the other people in your value chain. You have to think about your investors. You always have to think about what it is that they're looking for, whether they know what that thing is exactly themselves already or not, and then giving it to them. So I think that's the most important thing, is pretty much figuring out what a lot of people want and then giving it to them. So
Siva, Siva, I'm going to pick that up from you. You're aware of the fact that I've worked consistently between the Japanese family offices, bringing de-risking themselves. So it was just easier for them to move out of their comfort zone because they kind of matured into their ecosystem so well in most of the categories that it just made operative sense for them to de-risk. And they looked at Southeast Asia as markets to partner. And that is where we have focused significantly on debt partnerships more than equity partnerships, because debt is a large perspective of partnership, unlike equity, which can become various plays in the way of valuation, and your construct becomes much smaller. When you have consistently, I'm going back on times of building AirAsia for you, when you were a key part of building that team over the years, build multiple large firms in a professional setup in the Southeast Asia market with organizations that have grown significantly of impact. How have you consistently really looked at areas which make a difference and you are able to identify that as a journey ahead? What helps you make or take that decision?
Yeah, great question. And I think, whilst personally I've not built a billion-dollar business yet, but as you said, I've been very fortunate to have worked for an old school billionaire, one of these private entrepreneurs called Ananda Krishnan. And he had businesses.
That's where you and I know each other from.
That's right. Yes, from real estate, everybody's the Petronas Twin Towers to Astro to power plants, etc. And then with Tony Fernandez, when I got a call to come and work in AirAsia, and I think first thing is that it's that the success mantra has to be always get out of your comfort zone, right? Tony was always about, what he says, which I keep to today, is that never take no for an answer, right? Dream the impossible, right? Mr. Krishnan was a little bit more strong on governance and consistency and attention to detail. So he's a man of very few words. But one of the things that I remember him saying, because I was co-heading corporate finance and we were analyzing all of the deals, IPOs, mergers, privatizations, etc. And I kind of made a casual remark that, this is only a $10,000 acquisition, And he said, Siva, the amount of diligence that you go into for a $10 acquisition or a $10 billion acquisition has to be the same, right? You go through all the metrics. So those are some of the things that I learned from them. And really, I got into the startup game very late. So as now I'm working with a Beijing-based fintech company, and I'm now able to piece it together and help my founders are young enough to be my sons. But it's getting all those experience and helping them to scale up and become huge companies, right? So I think that's where I'm coming from, and what the lesson that I take is that giving them some discipline. So startups need a little bit of discipline and mindset and governance to be able to take it to the next level. And that's what I'm bringing into here. Right market at the right time. So for me, it's a case of working with these successful guys and hopefully being the next one. With my startup.
Yeah. In fact, that's my memory of Tan or T. Anandakrishnan is that in a board meeting we would often call him Tank.
Tank. Tech.
And the reason why he would, and I remember having a conversation with him, and it's so relevant to all of us at this point of time, is that you can kill. It doesn't matter how big is your enemy or what your focus point is. You always need a tank. That tank can be a small gun, but a tank can be a necessity. So look at the objective without recognizing or evaluating what you yourself have. And we were able to build a $10 billion enterprise, which today Geo sits on, and which we ended up building a company called Ask Me, and the infrastructure business of Aircell, which we combined together, restructured, and build a value to today's customer, and which we were very clear that the customer today is a digital platform of taking curation. Yeah. And I think that becomes the center core of governance, because governance is directly relation to the fact that what the customer wants, and policies are driven by that. Coming to Gitanj on that, Gitanj, help me identify, being in a market which is so inorganic or so unorganized, when you thought of changing the perspective of an end customer, value benefiting on the fact that, do you really question the fact that, do you really need this? Or you may need it, but do you need it this way? Became a perspective. Years back, you would always have an understanding of the fact that, should I have a house? Should I have a car? And some of those questions, I think Rendomojo has really made a pivotal decision on the ways the consumer today looks at it. We can give all fancy perspectives on millennial decisions perspective, but I really give it to you to really put that question up in front of all of us, that do you really need a home to live in? Why, do you really need a bed to sleep in? Do you really need to own that? And the
you need a bed to sleep in, but yeah, whether you need to really own that, yeah.
Own that, I think, yeah, that's a question that came up so vividly, and the fundamental play of changing that perspective and question. How did you come to perceive and be passionate about the fact that this needs to be done for markets? Because fundamentally, this is just such a global issue, right? Today, this is not necessarily only an India place, and I know Rendomojo is a young company, really killing it to build value. But fundamentally, if I look at the Middle East market, or where you have a lot of expat moving around, you have the Japan ecosystems where the people who work in Tokyo often have their full-time homes not in Tokyo, they live outside, and the young people who want to live in different places. What made you realize and bring out the idea that, this is what the objective is? What was your area of experience?
See, before, I think Airbnb started giving out these, like your empty space for rent. Nobody really thought that, at one point in time, it's going to just consume the entire hotel industry altogether. So this was a, specific question to us also, that, whether there'll be a big acceptability or not. But I kind of drove most of the values and the benefits from my own experience, because, just prior to Rendomojo, I was actually selling furniture and appliances, and I could not see myself as a consumer there because I was not buying. And in the past a decade, I have moved literally 4 to 5 cities. And thus came the whole aspect of moving the products from one place to the other, selling them at a scrap value, you're negotiating, and just the entire experience from moving place to place wasn't that, happy. So I was leading a big P&L, fairly large P&L, and there the consumer was not me, or somebody between 80 to 32, 33 years of age.
You're selling something which you yourself are not buying.
I was not buying. I was selling furniture and appliances, and that's when I figured out the economics of rental. And that was really, amazing for me. Just the economics was too huge. I think the biggest question was whether the adoption will be there or not. and whether we'll be able to, because in our business, we give the product to one person and then it comes back and then we give it to somebody else. So we need to keep on rotating it from one person to the other. So it was a big question from all the investor community that whether we'll be able to rotate these assets so many times. But now in 6 years, we now know, and we have proved that we have pretty much rotated one product for about roughly 5 times, and that product is still live, even after using a 5.5 years worth of useful life. What we have realized is this: the India is a 45% young. I think it's possibly the most young economies out there, and it's such a developed economy that I come from a very small town. My father comes from a village. He possibly got out of the village when he was or he was already 17 years old. So with this developing nation comes a lot of migration, So, a villager goes to a tier one comes to a metro, and metro keeps moving around within the metros. So the more the young population club that with the migration, and you need a Netflix kind of a subscription for furniture and appliances as well.
Yeah.
Because most of this population is staying with their roommates and constantly moving around. And this is not just about India. This is the pulse of any developing economy, be it Philippines, Indonesia,
Absolutely.
or even developed economies like Singapore or Middle East, because it's more of a young, I would say, a more of a young cultural norm, and it has only catalyzed post-COVID. If not anything, COVID has only told us that in a case of crisis, you will be stuck with the products. If you own quite a lot of them, you will be stuck with them. If you have a lot of EMIs and loans against it, you will be stuck with them. So essentially, and that's what is happening. I mean, post-COVID, our demand has shot up like crazy. And I believe this is just a tipping point. Slowly and gradually, one of the most central components of what we do, which I feel most of the ecosystems will start appreciating, is the most sustainable aspect of furniture and appliances renting, or any subscription commerce. That if one product is used by several people throughout its supply chain, eliminating the need for new products to come on board, and that I feel will be the center of most of the ecosystems globally. IKEA has already started furniture rental in close to about they want to try it out in 17 countries, only because of a sustainable push. In Japan, this Muji, which is one of the it's a $30 billion plus retail powerhouse, they've already started furniture rental throughout their stores. Everyone is doing it more from a climate lens, and I think that's the flexibility part of what the value proposition is will move towards more of a branding angle of a more sustainable way of I think e-commerce, and that's what we rented.
Ken, I want to pick your brains on the build side of it, because you've kind of built a lot of ecosystems. Not only, what is the most important part when you are aiming, or if you're already not a $1 billion entity? And when I say $1 billion, it's just a dogma to believe it is a successful, relatively large position to be in. But can you tell me one thing? I mean, when you look at an opportunity and you look at an opportunity which is matured, what are the building blocks of that opportunity? Is it people, it is purpose, or is it the market? Because the market could be re-questioned on the fact that it's not mature enough. People may not exist in that market, and I'm pretty sure Gitanj went through that of not having the people who even understood that category. And with Siva as well, and I've had multiple conversations when a lot of times he's doing transformation, he's always cross-ventilating on industry veterans rather than just finding that from industry people. As an entrepreneur in residence and someone who's now building entities, what is your top 2 or 3 building blocks which you don't ever shed an eye for?
So I assume you're talking about from the perspective of being inside the company and wanting to build a company, right? Well, people is definitely a huge thing. So that goes for the team that you have, the people that are building the product, the people that are selling the products, that you all have a shared vision and a shared purpose. Partly because for no other reason is in the early days, you need everybody to stick around and not make that much money, at least for a few years. So that's something that's important to get in place right away. And that extends also like to your whole ecosystem, I think. So it's the people inside of the company, but then also the people outside of the company, whether they're, mentors or industry experts that you can convince to give you some advice, or people that are going to share their distribution channel with you a little bit at the beginning in order for you to get a little bit of traction. So then you can go to the investors and show that you make progress. So then it kind of creates the virtuous cycle. I think that's a big thing. The second thing that comes to mind for me, which I've been realizing is more and more important, is like network effects, I guess. I don't know how many companies that have really grown to be like $1 billion companies in recent years that don't have some kind of network effects. So, whether that's an e-commerce marketplace or something that's related to social media, or sometimes it's just like building a community around your product and getting a lot of people talking about it. Those effects that build on each other and sort of create value on their own, that's not like a one-for-one input to like the amount of resources that you put into it, I think is something that's very important and that you need to plan for and see the roadmap of that from the beginning when you're first coming up with your idea.
Yeah. No, in fact, that is one of the key focuses for us, right? That's how we operate, where fundamental state-led commercialization partners, just like government of Malaysia or some parts when we work with Temasek on building operational value, which is still government, and obviously the royal family of Middle East as well as the royal family in Japan, we are able to consolidate their purpose very clearly and not only answer it like typical bankers where it is a conjunct of either a valuation or a bottom line, but really bring out the construct of how we can align or really intertwine the ability to raise capital and not be binary about it and only talk about investment return, but also be the partner to succeed. What Dikans also said, that the ability to raise debt because it's an asset heavy business, but value that debt not only for the return, which is augmented by the social ecosystem, but for the business itself. And I think that is where the consolidative value front of either being only a banker or either being only a management consultant or either being only an execution partner, which often is internal, we need to bring that together so that that sweet spot generates the value of creating excellence. Obviously, the denominator is technology, and that weaves it together. And I want to pick that up, Seva, from a technology standpoint. And one of the reasons, how has that for you and how you have seen that grow? Really interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, so, when I left AirAsia, I made a mistake. And I actually joined a Malaysian government digital agency, right? I was the chief strategy officer there. I say it was a mistake because, and I'm going to be careful here because, I don't want to say the wrong things, but let's just say, IDA works differently from how Malaysian, digital agencies work. But one of the things that I fear for traditional companies, having worked for them, is that today they're billion-dollar companies, but with technology and the young people, the way young people work, they will become obsolete in the future. Because why would a young, smart entrepreneur that's interned with Gitan's firm in India want to work for a traditional company because they're so set in their mindset? So I think, Kian, I really believe that an entrepreneur in residence is a must for every traditional company. Yeah. And there must be some sort of board buy-in at the board levels as well, so that there is a move towards transformation and bought in from the top as well, right? Most of the times, traditional companies don't want to change, right? But if you have someone like here in the organization doing little experiments here and there, and embracing technology, right? And of course, technology doesn't mean that you hire a bunch of robots and then you sack everybody else. No, we all know that, right? It's like, improving the value of the worker, etc., and training them, upskilling them. So I think technology is very important, but I think boards and companies must have that mindset, to embrace it if they want to be, billionaire companies in the future. Otherwise, the Flipkarts and all these startups are going to come around and without seemingly any proper governance processes and thought, it suddenly become huge. So I think that's my thing is about technology needs to be embraced and used in traditional companies.
No, I think the augmented value, which I think all of us are discussing about over here, building a billion-dollar company, and going back to the fact that $1 billion is just an adage to saying that you're relatively successful, and I'm using relatively successful these days because it is relatively successful. You can still be a much smaller and be more profitable than $1 billion entity. And I think that is the sense of how you build an organization, not only to recognize the fact that today we have the ability to take over some of the historic old large enterprises who have led market share, which often are not going at the same pace
Right.
of which firms like Gitan's firms and his current and his future firms will run at, because it will only get better. The fundamental play is to really recognize how we can build something for impact. And I'm hearing the word mindset again and again from each one of you, really when Gitan said, the mindset for him to realize that he needs to purposefully execute something which was not necessarily which he himself was using. And then his second mindset was to change the mindset of financiers to explain that how the value of the asset is not in a binary tone, but in a multiple ecosystem perspective. And then Ken said that, the people value today, with the world becoming smaller, today you may just hire a sales head who's probably not worked in your geography ever, but has the ability to bring in the either enterprise partnerships or people partnerships to scale up value propositions. And I have seen that significantly within the family offices that we work with, because as you plug into people who have the ability to get leveraged, and that is where the family offices for us work beautifully. And when we work with companies within large government-led incubators, where we often call it state-led commercialization, the scale automatically changes. I mean, imagine Gitan, we sharing a possibility of multiple state guest houses or official ecosystems, just using, instead of buying new furniture, you just rotate all the guest houses across. And I think that automatically changes the perspective of what the value of the opportunity is. And we can obviously address it through capital impact. What has been, Gitanj, for you, been a stumbling block when you go to market where you felt that we need to still be careful about what we speak before we take the leap of faith? What has been one of your learnings? And that will be interesting to hear, specifically while building Rento Mojo as really a unicorn in the category it operates in.
If I understand correctly, what you're saying, what's been the biggest challenge to the business, or what we have been, tongue-tied with?
I think tongue-tied. I'd love to hear what you were tongue-tied with. And you said, this is something that we believed in. We went out and we came back saying that, hey, we probably were over pitching, and we'd love to reconsider that, because we strongly believe in it. But obviously we felt that this is something that we'd revisit in some ways.
I think it was more stemming. I think I do have a couple of instances. I was of the firm believer that renting would be asset agnostic. I thought it can be taken to other assets like bikes and mobiles as well. Because with the way technology is happening every 2.5 years, there is some or the other new iPhone which is coming up. So I thought people will be able to take up a new iPhone every 2 years, or a new piece of handset which is coming from Xiaomi or some other brand. There are other nuances to an asset leasing when it comes to a business model. I mean, you need to take most of the return back, plus make your LTV, plus make your spreads at the end of the day in that 2-year cycle then. So this is something that we, went a little tongue-tied with. It was, I still believe in that it's still asset agnostic, because I've seen there is an entity in, I think, Germany, which has raised over $100 million and $1 billion worth of debt lines now. And they're predominantly into electronics renting. Although in India, we faced a little bit of a challenge, convincing the ecosystem on the economics of I think, an electronic rental. So that was something that one of the examples of how I think
why has that not happened with a consumer who is willing to rent furniture? Wouldn't it be easier for him to rent another equally expensive consumer decision product, which is a premium iPhone or any of these computers? Maybe computers has been a traditional renting commodity, right?
So I would not bucket computers and laptops in the same bucket as electronics, and washing machines also not in the same bucket. So I think these are three separate buckets as far as I've seen. And the predominant factor and the variable within that is the useful life of the asset. And with which the technological change is happening. So desktop still is a bulkier product, still slightly more useful life than a mobile, whereas washing machine and microwaves are 5 years plus or 6 years plus. So even though the consumer demand is supremely high, I think the biggest question mark around the useful life of the asset in terms of mobile really was, I mean, there was more data that was required to, to really tell people about the economics of the business. So that I think takes time to build. I can't today say that, okay, hey, even if the demand is so great, the business will be powerful. I mean, there are many businesses out there, and when the demand is supremely high, but it'll take decades to turn profitable. And maybe, even those businesses turn unicorns because, the demand is so supremely high. But that's a slightly different path to walk. I mean, in which the promoters and the companies do tell that we will not be profitable even in the next 10 years. And they're still able to rally around with the investors. So I think it's to each its own. I think in India specifically, electronics is not pushed off because there is a certain resistance around the economics. But I'm a firm believer that at some point of time, it would be a norm, as what we're seeing in Germany already.
Yeah, Ken, at PZ, what is one of the key problem statement that you are raising challenge on?
The primary problem statement that we're trying to solve is that live stream selling is something that's catching on in popularity all over the world, taking the cue from Taobao in China in the first place. But it's very messy, and there aren't a lot of sort of integrated tools for people in Southeast Asia to use. So in China, Taobao kind of solves people's problems pretty well, and there's an ecosystem around that. But in Southeast Asia, people try to do it themselves. They have to find the products that they want to sell themselves. They have to do the stream. They have to manage the orders. They have to ship the stuff themselves. So we're trying to provide them with like one integrated solution that's really live seller centric, which we think is very powerful today because everybody's stuck at home. A lot of people lost their jobs. So many industries are disrupted. And this is a way for people to make money at home.
Are you also doing it for the services line of businesses? Would they also be integrated, or is classically a product-centric perspective?
So we're trying to stay as classically product-centered as possible in order to scale. I think it's kind of easy to take the shortcut to start to provide services because it makes sense sometimes, and you can see that people need it. But if you go down that road, I think you end up being sort of like in an MCN niche,
yes,
something that can kind of scale country to country and globally. So that's something that I don't think anybody has really done in this space yet, and that's something that we're trying to do.
Lovely. We'll definitely speak on that. So, quick one. I just wanted to have a quick chat on what change are you doing within the new fintech space that you're trying to drive, and love to hear a quick one around it, and then I'll consolidate, summarize the session.
Yeah, so Kian, we should talk because I think this influencer marketing is something that we Keisha, which is a Beijing-based company doing Alipay and WeChat mini programs, is all we need to educate this part of the world. But the problem that we're trying to solve as a mobile payment solutions company is basically just like how Tony Fernandez had this saying, now everybody can fly. For us, it's basically now everybody can pay. So just like when you have your phone and you just take it wherever you go, switch on and then roam on a partner network and make a call without having to buy a local SIM card. The whole idea is that we aggregate all payment gateways and wallets so that if you're a partner member and you go to one of our merchants, then you just switch it on and then we do all the back end. If you're a WeChat payer in India, you go and scan the QR code, and then the conversion, the FX, everything is done by us, and so that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And at the same time, I think the advantage we have being a Chinese company, and of course when we started this, it was only the Chinese wallets that was like 99% use case, right? I mean, Southeast Asia, I'm not sure about India. There's about 60, 70 wallets, but very little use case, right? But all the marketing tricks that we've learned from Ali and WeChat, we're trying to imbue it into the local ecosystem, payments ecosystem. So that's really exciting. That's what's really getting me motivated. And then, when I was introduced to these two young founders, they liked what I'd done in AirAsia, which is, basically go in and scale. And Southeast Asia is a huge market, right? We have a lot of Chinese customers that want to access Southeast Asia, but Southeast Asia is so fragmented, right? 10 markets, 10 languages, 10 central banks. They're just looking for a single API connection to be able to access all of the markets. So that's the value that we bring.
And that's something I'm looking for right now. So it'd be great if you could solve that problem.
Yeah. And of course,
awesome.
Influencer marketing is big, and so I think all big companies need to think like this, right? So
lovely. For the respect of time, I'm going to summarize the session. I think fantastic conversation. And one last thing that comes to your mind when you think about building $1 billion enterprise, what is that one word that comes to my mind? I'll start with Ken. What is one thing that comes to your mind when you say building a $1 billion enterprise?
I think it just goes back to the first thing that I said, and that's just finding the product market fit in a market where there's a lot of people that want what you're building.
Yeah, lovely. Gitansh?
I mean, which on paper or an IPO? That's what comes to my mind. Yeah.
I think for me it's an agile sense and response mindset.
Yeah, I have built a $1 billion enterprise years back. I exited, and we've done some exits in the past as well, which are around that piece. For me, I think people has been a central part of the play. People both internally and externally. External obviously can be termed as customers, but I think that is exactly what all of you guys were also representing. I think three things that came out of this conversation is really having a focused mindset and believing in that perspective. The ability to both enhance abilities internally on people and developing external market, and what Siva said, the ability to connect the perceived connected, which are within their own ecosystems, which kind of brings in. I think mindset comes to me as one of our significant ecosystems. Thank you guys for taking out time. Really appreciate, and we should all talk offline. And thank you so much for taking out time and being with us. Much to do. Thank you.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Enough. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.